Good afternoon. Welcome to the House Progressive Caucus. I'm Representative Kate Logan and the minority leader for House Progressives. Today we're going to have a focus on the Land Access and Opportunity Board. We're just going to start off with introductions. I've already sent out leadership notes by email, so we're not going to go over those. And again, I'm Kate Logan. I represent Burlington, the Chittenden 16 district, which is most of Old North End and downtown Burlington.
Ornella Mata Figueroa, one of the co-directors of the Land Access and Opportunity Board, and I live in Greensboro.
Brian Gina, state representative from Burlington, Chittenden 15, which is part of the Old North End and most of the East District. I'm on the House Health Care Committee and House Ethics Panel, and I am a member of the Land Access and Opportunity Board appointed by the National Association of Social Workers Vermont chapter.
I'm Alex. Heather Thomas, Executive Director of the Progressive Party. Chloe Tomlinson, I represent Courtney Record, I'm on the House of Representatives. C.D. Kieran, I'm with Action Circles.
All right, Brian, go ahead.
So today, we are going to just jump right in and skip any updates and hear from our guest from the Land Access and Opportunity Board. We're going to hear a bit about the current programs of the board, and then about a proposed piece of legislation that the board has created this year that outlines some of our work moving forward or some of our goals, and then we'll have some time for questions. So without further ado, I hand it over to Ornella.
Thank you. I want to just share with you all that we were called in to give our FY27 testimony at noon today. So all of our preparation time went to that. And I am here with our FY27 presentation for you all. And I'm going to do my best. I also printed the bill for all of us to have a copy of it. Wonderful. And we begin, no matter where we are, with our touchstones, which are at the very front of our presentation. And they are these: that we listen generously, and we speak our truth from our heart and mind, that we make the way that we work together an example of what is possible, and that we trust that we each hold a piece of the puzzle and that we need each other's pieces to understand the whole picture. Do we all consent to working with those touchstones in mind today for your time together? Thank you so much. Is everyone here familiar with the Land Access and Opportunity Board, or would a brief overview be helpful?
I think for the record, a brief overview would be helpful. If there's any listeners or students learning, etc.
Wonderful. Great. So the Land Access and Opportunity Board was created in 2022 in like the housing omnibus bill of that year. And it was established to address disparities in land and housing access for folks who are most marginalized in our communities. We have a number of priority populations, and those priority populations we say encompass most of Vermont because they are these. All low in income and poor people. They are all people of color, immigrant people new to Vermont, individuals who are psychiatric survivors, anyone who has a disability in our state, and LGBTQIA Vermonters.
I lost track. Did you say agricultural workforce?
I didn't, but they're also represented by us. We have 12 appointing authorities, and let's see, I think they're listed here somewhere. We have 12 appointing authorities, and we have 2 members from each one of our appointing authorities. Great. And they are the Vermont Office of Racial Equity, Vermont Commission on Native American Affairs, the NAACP of Vermont, Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, Liberation Ecosystem, Migrant Justice, the Vermont Everytown Project, National Association of Social Workers, Vermont chapter, Pride Center Vermont, U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants in Vermont, Vermont Developmental Disabilities Council, and Vermont Psychiatric Survivors make up our board, and we have 2 representatives from each one of these appointing authorities, and we have robust participation at times for both members from each one of our appointing authorities. Our statute is really interesting. If folks haven't had a chance to read it, I would encourage everyone, go and read it. We have primarily 2 powers. We have what we call broadly our advisory powers, which is what we employ when we are participating in working groups and when we're working in rulemaking spaces. We are working with those advisory powers. If you see here, this timeline slide, for example, you see down here some of the ways in which we're applying these advisory powers. And we're a part of all like zoning rulemaking groups. And so anything that's being managed by the Land Use Review Board right now, we're a part of like the Land Banks Working Group. We supported the coordination ahead of this Act 59 working group. We've been working with the community resilience hubs for the group that put out the resiliency toolkit, and we've been supporting their work. And we've done many other, yeah, we have a whole list of partners, and Jean's putting that comprehensive list together. I don't know if Jean's there. Oh, yay! Do you want to share it in the screen, our big partners?
Can you introduce yourself quickly, Gigi?
Yes.
So everyone else got a chance to.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm not there with you in person. I'm Jean Hamilton. I am co-director along with Ornella of the LAOB. And I'll go ahead and share my screen. Oh, I can't, sorry. Sharing's not turned on, it says.
Courtney's trying to let you.
Okay.
You should have capability now. Don't Zoom bomb us. Remember that? Zoom bombing? That's why we have security. Here we go. It's a presentation!
So this is who the LAOB is working with right now. You can see that the LAOB web is very big, and we are in many spaces doing our important advocacy work of connecting community members with the systems. Our priority is to make sure that folks who are most marginalized in our communities have a voice in policymaking, and that we're supporting community engagement efforts so they move from being purely representation to ownership. And we use the community engagement to ownership model as we presented here by facilitating power. And if you haven't had a chance to look at this, it's a really great tool that supports systems in developing advocacy and community engagement processes. Ooh, look how funny, the overview must have like fallen off in my bag. But yeah.
Would you be willing to send that to us?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, we'll send it out to everyone. And it goes from informing community, which is what many rulemaking or consulting community, to what it means to collaborate, involve, and defer to, which is what we call ownership, which is when community members are a part of rulemaking, decision-making, policy writing from the very beginning. Okay, how are we doing on time?
It's 12:15.
Oh, look at that. Okay, so we have, so I talked about advisory powers, I talked about our grant making. We're launching programs. And we have here like a program update slide. Yeah. like this. Thank you. So we have the Community Resilience Hub, there we go. The Community Resilience Hub, the Beginning Developer Training Program, our Shelter for All, Secure Housing Coach Program, and our advisory powers. I'm trying to think about where to start. Do you have a preference on where we begin?
We talked about focusing on the housing related programming work that you're doing.
It is all housing related.
Oh, awesome.
Yes. So
Makes sense.
I will then kind of stay away a little bit more from the community resilience help work. But I think this committee,
Caucus.
Caucus.
Yeah.
Would really benefit from hearing about it a little bit.
I do think we
too.
should, because the
Yeah.
community resilient hubs can be a resource for housing, but it has initially started out our work as a reaction to the lack of housing. So I think we should hear a little bit about each of them.
Yeah, the community resilience grant came out of our Shelter for All program primarily. We established the Shelter for All committee 2 winters ago, because of all of the issues we're seeing in the hotel funding, and to start working together to talk to impacted community members and look for ways forward that included the voices of community members. The first few months of this LAOB committee were primarily board members and staff in the park in Burlington, talking directly with impacted community members, doing long public comment sections in which we listened. It was really hard work for everyone involved, and also taught us a lot about how conflicted the area of shelter is and all of the blind spots, and how difficult and interdependent this work is, and how important it is that for us to be like moving through this shelter issue, that we're working outside of silos and inter-system groups to be able to really address these issues. With that, we were looking at the same time as the Shelter for All committee is meeting, we have years of severe flooding in our state. So at the same time, we have community and impacted community members and leaders and grassroots organizers cleaning out basements, getting together, trying to figure out what happened here, what happened with our community response, where is FEMA? And then fast forward 2 years, and then, last year we have the third year in a row during, where there were statewide flooding on the same day. And on that day, we had an LAOB event in which we gathered together and talked about water, and what are we gonna do as a state with all of this beautiful water, and also all of the water issues we are having. We launched a Community Resilience Awards. Jean, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I'm sorry, the sound quality is not great for me, so I couldn't quite hear that question. Ornella, can you say it again?
Okay, I was wondering if you wanted to share a little bit about the Community Resilience Awards and how that came together.
Great. And like the history of how it came together with Rad Weavers, you're saying, or where we are now with it?
The grants just now. I talked about the history with Red Weavers and the consistent flooding and the Shelter for All committee.
Okay, got it. So, yes, so we have been, I don't know if you, Ornella, already talked about our budget excitement we had last year, which is that in August, the administration reverted 1 million of our dollars from our FY26 budget. So we had been in the process of rolling out, developing these grant programs, and then hit a speed bump as we then had to realign and go through a BAA process with the administration. Luckily, fortunately, it looks like we will be getting our $1 million returned to us in the Budget Adjustment Act. That is all to say that these are the dollars that we had flagged for our FY26 budget to put into grant making. And we are now putting in a portion of the money we retained plus $250,000 of that million into these resilience grants, which have been designed, informed by those two processes that Ornella just shared with you. So all of the listening and meaning making that happened in our Shelter for All committee, and then all of the listening and meaning making and actual development of this resilience, community resilience hub toolkit. And the grants are intended to support communities in building hubs, resilience hubs that really fit into an approach to resilience that leans into and activates the community, what kinds of resources communities have, what kinds of interest and priorities they have, what community members can realistically contribute, and that really meets their realistic needs. Versus what we often see in terms of resourcing coming from kind of the more entrenched institutions that tend to focus on what can the system allow for. How often the system asks for communities to put together projects that respond to the needs of the system. These resilience grants were really designed to respond to the needs, the opportunities, and capacities of the community. We have so far received our letter of intent round for this first round just closed this weekend, and we've received, I believe it was 34 letters of intent. 37, is that what you said? Okay. From all 14 counties, really representing an extraordinary range of initiatives that range from, very grassroots, very community-led projects to more sort of, NGO type institutions. I'll use CVOEO as an example. To even more kind of like structural institutions. And so we're seeing a really wide range of the types of projects, and of course a wide geographic range, which is really exciting because our intention is to fund a cohort of resilience hubs that then can work together, as a cohort to learn together, to activate change together, and to actually strategize on sharing resources, or strategies like, hey, if we all bulk buy shovels together, we can get them, at 1/3 of the price as if each of our communities was buying 10 shovels. So that's where we are. We've just closed the letter of intent round and the request for proposals. All of the letter of intent providers knew that they would be invited to submit a full proposal, and those proposals have been released. The request for proposals is structured and released and will be due in the first round in about a month.
Thank you. Can we move on to the other items, the other programs now?
Sure.
Because I think we heard, if people have more questions, we can come back to it later, but just so we get through everything.
The Beginning Developers Training Program is a program that we have been collaborating on with Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And it's been in the works from the beginning with Jean and I joining the LAOB. It was one of the first projects that we started with VHFA, saw a need and a gap of developers from marginalized communities joining the development field. And little by little, we started to collaborate with the HCD, VHFA, we saw good alignment, and we are rolling. This weekend is the first one-day workshop. I have somewhere here little scans for barcodes for anyone that would like to sign up and to participate either in the workshop, the community of practice, or do the intake to be a part of it. There's a website related to the community of practice, a whole platform, like an online platform. I don't even know how many folks are signed up. Jean, do you have a number of how many folks have filled out the intake and are ready to go here?
Yeah, as of last week, I believe we were at 85.
So
And as like an
cool.
interesting data point, about half of those people have indicated that they already own land and their primary barrier to building on that land is lack of knowing what to do next, which speaks to both an incredible uptake of like 85 Vermonters, had an opportunity to fill out a form starting in January, and took it. And then of those, a lot of people like actually have a land resource that they want to develop housing on. And the barrier for them is knowing what to do next, which this training program will directly respond to, along with the other supports that are part of this program.
Yeah, so here are some scan codes for folks to exit the intake. And
In case someone's watching the video.
yeah, that's great. Thank you
This
so
is
much.
gonna cause the national, have you seen the Black Mirror episode with this? We'll talk about it later.
Great. If anybody wants to sign up, we have 3 new staff. We hired a manager for this program. Their name is Dave Martinson. They're amazing. And willing to support anyone interested in development. And we have our community of practice. There's a specific interest groups within that community of practice. I do not have the expansive list. Also happy to send it to you all. I don't know if Jean has the list in front of her. I know Tay sent an email with the list of the different communities of practice if you wanted to read them out loud.
I saw that.
Yes.
I don't have that, but I can share some that I'm.
Yeah.
Oh, you have it?
If I can find it,
Just type my name in the search bar probably.
yeah, I'll just read it. I won't read all 80 million, but I'll read some of it. So we've got, for example, that's it.
The communities of practice, yeah.
Okay, so that's not 80, it's 80 developers. Here's the communities of practice. There's a Black-led development group, an IDD or other disability housing, trades folk network, people-led shelter and transitional housing, a policy group, an off-farm farm worker housing, ONA, what does that mean?
Office of New Americans.
Office of New Americans Housing, CLTs, that's Community Land Trust, right, and cooperative communities, including agri-hoods, from the hood, agri-hood, and fill housing for rent or sale.
So those are the specific kind of subgroups within that community of practice that we're starting with. Eventually, we will respond to the community. So if there's a special subgroup that needs additional support, we will also create that. Yeah.
Do you do shelter for all already, or is there more for that?
I'm trying to figure out what else is here. Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about it already.
Because you gave grants, there were resilience grants, then there were shelter grants that, how many, maybe one of you could say a little bit about what shelter work did we fund, just quickly?
Yeah, we funded 8 shelters. Is that what I see here?
Mm-hmm.
In Bennington, Brattleboro, Middlebury, 2 in Rutland, and 2 in the Colchester, Chittenden, Burlington area. And I think those grants were for $25,000 a piece. And with support of our community, our board members, Franchina over here specifically, we developed like guidelines for shelter providers that highlight like what is it that we name as best practices. And there's I don't have them here for you all, but do you remember that? Yeah.
There was the 4 pillars of recovery, the 8 principles of the 8 dimensions of wellness, and then 6 trauma-informed practices. And these were taken from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, so federal guidelines regarding pathways to recovery through healthcare providers. So what's interesting is that we have frontline healthcare workers at the Howard Center, for example, being trained in these practices, but the institutions are not designed to implement them yet. So what we did is we created funding tied to these guidelines and asked people applying to show us how they were gonna roll out these implement these guidelines in to their existing or proposed shelter programs. So trying to change the structure to align with what's considered national best practice right now to promote recovery.
Thank you. So then, and, let me see, what else is here?
The housing coach program, can you hear about that?
Yes, the Secure Housing Coach Program is in development. We've already done a lot of community engagement for it and our focus groups, et cetera. And, it will provide direct support to impacted community members through staffing some secure housing coaches. And those coaches are also going to be helping to establish best practices and then supporting a coordinated effort with all the housing navigators in the system through HHAB partnerships, et cetera, to then improve system-wide practices and provide a gap that we're seeing, which is that many case managers in our state do not have case management support for what is the word, continued best practices. And we want to give them the ability to have mentoring and case management supervision. So we're going to be offering containers for making sure people don't fall through the cracks. It's a way for navigators across the state to get resourced if they don't have the adequate supports for a specific client, to share client information and limits and barriers so we can advise the systems through our advisory powers, and give them the community and give our navigation system a bit of a more like statewide cohesive support. Because we did an assessment in which we investigated and hired an external consultant to document all of the housing supports existing in the state. That's something we can share with you all. We have like a spreadsheet. And one of the things we noticed is that there is housing navigation in a lot of places in the state, but it's like operates as like one staff member in a silo or two staff member in a silo. And it's really hard for folks in those conditions to get the professional development support that they need, right? And become aware of all of these dimensions of wellness and also, serve our community members.
So Gina, if there's nothing else you want to add to that component, I would like to quickly review the bill. I'll make it as quick as I can so there's time for questions, because we want to wrap up at 12:45 so people get a little break before committee and you can get to your testimony and have a breather and not be driven,
Yeah, I think if
excessively.
there's, Jean, I will jump in front of you quick. I think you're gonna want to talk about this. One of the things we'd love for you to see is this slide that says the problems we see. So this is near the end. Okay. Near the end of the packet, there's a slide that says the problems we see.
Would you want to talk about that for a second, like a minute, Gene, and then I'll talk about the bill, because the bill kind of addresses some of this, so maybe you could set the stage.
Yeah. So hopefully you've heard that we have been in many, many, many different kinds of spaces and rooms in the state over the last couple of years. Those have included very formal institutional spaces like legislative working groups, all the way to the opposite end of the spectrum of very informal case studies and meetups with our community members and those who feel most excluded from those formal institutional spaces. And this problems we see sort of bullet list are themes that come up in every room we're in. That that we, everybody, I think everybody can at least say that they want Vermont communities to be affordable and prosperous and a place where people are thriving. But that to get there, we really need to have more people participating in the solutions. We have a critical lack of capacity at our municipalities. We have a critical lack even in our governing bodies. Like we have a lack of diversity of perspectives, a lack of diverse skill sets, and in many cases across the state, just a lack of people who feel empowered to participate. You'll see at the top, there's a bold question of what do we have when we don't have enough money? And we are clearly in a moment, coming out of the pandemic where there were a lot of more sort of discretionary public resources to infuse into our communities. We are now swinging into a time of real austerity, lack of financial resources. And our communities actually know best what to do when we don't have money. Like, what else do we have besides money? Because our communities have lived at the intersections of economic marginalization, oftentimes for generations, to the extent that our communities have cultural practices of how do you unlock resources and empowerment and the ability to care for ourselves and one another. When there's not enough cash flow to do that. So, some of these other problems, I'm sure you all feel it in your committees and in the rooms you're in, is that silos create an incredible amount of inefficiency. The silos that we see happen, both physically, like people don't get together, ideologically, because they think like, oh, this is a conversation about housing versus a conversation about access to land or agriculture and the ability to grow food. And what we see is we end up creating a lot of policies and programs that go the wrong direction because they're not informed by the essential dialogue that needs to happen between those different institutions and sectors and silos. And the silos, there was another thing I wanted to say about the silos, which is lost to me now, so I'm going to let that one go. But you'll see as a theme throughout our programs and our work that we believe that there is a tremendous amount of people power that is available to be unlocked in this state, and that we can do that by creating, real invitations and real resources to empower people to use that power. So really, like, the Community Resilience Toolkit and the Community Resilience Grants are a great example of that, of listening to communities about what can they do, not what does the state think they should do, but what can communities do and what do they need to be able to do that. Our communities are very capable of saying what do they need. They have lived experience that has led to a lot of expertise. And often what they need is for the institution and the state to believe in them and for modest amounts of resources to then be able, resources to support basic functions like coming together, a facilitator, some capacity to provide technical assistance and capacity building. And with that, communities have a lot of skill and localized knowledge that can sort of unlock these bottlenecks of lack of capacity that we're seeing. Ornella, did I hit your points? Is there anything you want to add?
The only thing I will add is that the LAOB is then looking at these levers, right? Like, let's look at the community resilience hubs, for example, and let's also look at, we want to put shelter in municipalities. We also have a technical assistance issue in a capacity gap in our municipalities. We also need capacity in municipalities to implement all of the zoning rulemaking, all of the shelter rulemaking, there's all of these ways in which having those resilience hubs is going to then facilitate and support all of these other needs coming together. That's how we're looking about our LAOB investments. We're looking at investments that have impact in many different ways and that are like specific and intentional because we don't have a whole lot of resources.
So
And responsive to the community needs.
So speaking of us not having a lot of resources, maybe that's a good chance to pivot to a quick review of the bill. That the members of the caucus signed on, so you've probably had a chance to read it, but I think for the record, just doing a quick overview of it for anyone listening. So it's an act relating to land access and opportunity. It has a section of intent in it where it talks about supporting the human right of housing and promoting public health and community safety by preserving affordable housing, creating new social and economic opportunities for development and maintenance of housing infrastructure. And there's a findings section which refers to a variety of legislative reports and actions over the last few years from different committees that illustrate the need for the actions in this bill. So people can read that if they want more detail. Then the bill creates a fund attached to the Land Access and Opportunity Board. The original bill that inspired this formation of the LAOB called for a fund, but the legislature chose to create the LAOB and ask the LAOB to study its own purpose before giving it any money or real work to do. And that first year was a lot of like proving the point, and then staff were hired, and then work is now rolling out. And then we just gave out our first grant out of our emergency money. But we're asking for a fund in this bill so that there's a place for donations to go as well as additional funding for the board to then use in a variety of ways, which include the purchase of
Down payment assistance grants to support homeownership.
well, hold on. I'm just trying to find a certain place in it before I lose my place.
Yeah.
So a fund so that can provide grants or loans for the following activities: purchase of buildings and land by current tenants to expand access to owner-occupied housing, the renovation of owner-occupied multi-unit housing, the development of housing infrastructure for land owned through a residential cooperative or other form of collective ownership, and the development of transitional housing. It also asks the board to prioritize projects that create self-sufficient neighborhoods and communities that use intersectional and circular designs such as localized waste management, regenerative agricultural practices, and independent energy generation, developing social and physical infrastructure that expands access to community resources like tool banks, labor pools, workforce training programs, disaster relief, and other resilience strategies, supports members from historically marginalized groups, and it names people who experienced homelessness, substance use disorder, mental physical disabilities, incarceration, involvement in the justice system, history of DCF involvement, the elderly or agricultural workforce. It encourages us to work with a variety of partners to identify public land and buildings in areas designated for housing, to integrate housing for members from historically marginalized communities into neighborhoods and communities, to support cooperative management or ownership, integrate community resources, and co-locate health resources, workforce development opportunities, food access, to provide for circular waste management, energy production and storage, and propose additional incentives for public-private partnerships and coordinate the development of the neighborhoods surrounding this housing infrastructure. And then it calls for a working group, a land security working group that would look at disparate economic and environmental justice impacts of various policies and the identifying protection of agricultural land for community food security purposes. And last but not least, it creates a tax study, and that's where we'll end because it ties into our next week's discussion of taxes. And this tax study would ask the Department of Taxes and JFO to work together to provide information to the General Assembly that the LAOB could then act on. And this report would include the definition, looking at the various definitions of affordability for tenants, looking at the variables that impact the price of rent for property owners, look at tax incentives for affordable rent that might amplify existing tax benefits, look at penalties that would deter owners from excessive rent, and look at how tax incentives for property owners, giving tenants the right of first refusal to purchase property under rent or allowing rent to own could encourage home ownership for tenants, and recommend options and opportunities to provide advantageous tax treatment to properties owned by Vermonters from historically marginalized and disadvantaged communities, and project the general fiscal impact of these various penalties and incentives on the state's revenue. So the idea is that we would get report that talks about different ways of using taxation to impact access to land and land and opportunity. And then the LAOB could use this in our work, but so could the General Assembly in our policy making. So with really no time left, are there any questions on the presentations? That was a lot to cover.
Just one question immediately came to mind for me in terms of the resiliency hubs. Are you talking with the RPCs at all about how to maybe
Yeah, we have our
locate that
pieces that
service?
have applied for the resilience hubs, and we're definitely in active communication with, Charlie Baker, who I think represents all of one of the ones that represents all of the RPCs. And, yeah, we have been in active dialogue, and we definitely have some that applied for the funding and are hoping to collaborate in their communities to help launch resilience hubs.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you. There's another part of this bill that we are very excited about and would love to come back and talk in the future about, which is the land security working group.
Which I blew through quickly.
Yeah.
But it was the part where we're calling for a working group to look at how various policies are impacting.
Yeah.
If we do a food security or an agricultural focused one, that would be a great time, I think. We haven't done that yet.
And what's the committee of jurisdiction for this bill?
General and housing,
Is it?
yes,
Okay.
that's where it is currently housed,
Okay.
pun intended. But you all have to go to appropriations now, right? To
Yeah.
talk about our budget, so on that note.
Well, I have an announcement to make
Okay.
first.
Yes.
So for anybody who is listening and for the Progressive Caucus generally, S209 was voted out of the Senate on Friday. That is the bill on sensitive locations for ICE access in the state. And while the bill was in the Senate, all language about state and county and municipal buildings was removed from S209, which means that if S209 is passed as it came over to us from the Senate, that Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Customs and Border Patrol would be allowed to enter the State House, would be allowed to enter the Economic
With
Service
masks
Division.
on, right?
With masks
Yeah.
on.
No idea.
Because I don't think we can't legislate on masks. That was struck down in California by a court. I think, anyhow, so that all of that language got stripped out of S209. The only opportunity that we have to get it back in is by putting it back in the House. Right now, Republicans are saying that their vote is split on S209, or their vote is a no. All the judiciary members of the Republican caucus are planning to vote no on the bill, and right now we have an absent member of that committee, so the vote is tied 5-5, so the vote might just die in committee. They're saying that, but the governor supports S209 as it came out of the Senate. We further need the governor to agree to some limited, more specific language about government buildings. His problem with it was that it was too broad. The terminology that was in S209 originally was too broad. And so we need the governor to communicate to the House of Representatives that he would sign off on a bill that has some narrowed language about public buildings in the state. Otherwise, yeah, it's gonna go forward as it is from the Senate, or potentially die in committee. So folks need to reach out to the governor's office and House leadership to let them know that they want S209 amended. Democrats are trying to get the bill passed this week so that it is signed by the time they go home for town meeting day. I can say that they did something about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for
That was
having me.
amazing.
Next week, taxes.
Yep.
Join us at noon.
Taxes.